whiskey, a bottle of pills. You're still trying to change the way you feel. You're broken.
All right, welcome back to an episode of the Grit for Life Radio. And hey, if you listen to us at any time, if you are someone who listens to us on iHeartRadio, Spotify, maybe you follow our YouTube channel, wherever you are listening to this podcast, we currently have a live stream right now on our TikTok. You can find us on TikTok at Grit Nation. If you like our intro music, that song is Transcend the Machine by Mick Blankenship. He is his current album that is out is a fantastic rock album if you like rock music. And I know he has another album that is coming out here shortly. I was just talking to him recently. Mick is the genuine guy. He's great at what he does. He's great music. So if you like what you hear when we do the intro music to our podcast, then what I ask you to do is just go check out Mick Blankenship. Let him know if you hook up with him on social media. Just let him know that Grit for Life, Grit Nation sent you over his way. Really, really good guy. He's given us the ability and the freedom to be able to use the Transcend the Machine song as our intro. And Mick, I appreciate that. So, another podcast. Getting ready to do this podcast, I really was putting some thought into it. And it really came from something that I have learned, but as well as something that stirred up from a conversation that I was having with a friend of mine on TikTok. And actually, she's currently watching right now live on the TikTok. Vita, how are you, my friend? Good to see you watching us. Vita and I, we were on a live the other day on TikTok, and we started talking, and then we had a lot of other people that jumped into the live on TikTok. And one of the subjects that came up that really got me to think, because when I started sharing what we're going to talk about today in the podcast, it is one of those things where it really hit me, because I guess it's something that I've learned. And sometimes, even as a coach, I can learn something and then it becomes habit, and I almost forget that it's something that needs to be shared with other people, because we all don't learn the same thing. We learn from each other. As someone who has coached sports, as someone who's been a leader in the military, someone who has led people in changing their lives, there's still times that I get into a pattern in my life where I just kind of take things for granted. And I hate that. But when it comes up and I realize it, I can really appreciate that. And the subject we're going to talk about today is something that I struggled with for a while. But then, as I began to sift through and contemplate and really connect with who I am as a person and how to make my life better, it is something that became a habit. But because it became a habit, it is something that sometimes I forget is not always a habit to other people. And as a coach, that can be rough, but at the same time, I want those who are listening to this, who are watching live on TikTok, to be encouraged, because I want you to understand that if it has become a habit for me, the subject we're going to talk about today can be a habit for you. So that's encouraging, because when we begin to really take a look at what we're going to talk about on this podcast, where you are in your life right now, it may seem impossible. You're saying, okay, coach, just get to the point. Like, what are we going to talk about today? Well, I'm glad that you asked that. In my conversation with this friend of mine, and with several other people who were doing the live on my live TikTok, we began to talk about scars. Now, scars are a funny thing. What makes a scar? Well, in the bare, like if you want to really truly break it down, what makes a scar is that we've labeled it a scar. It is a scar because we say it is a scar. And scars can come in so many different ways. We can have physical scars. We can have mental and emotional scars. But when I start really thinking about the in-depthness of scars and how we handle it, we handle it in different ways, just as scars come in different ways. Physical scars can be something as small as you have a small cut that doesn't heal right, and it leaves a small scar, something easy to cover up. It's not that difficult. It doesn't really bother us. Or it can become to a physical scar, can become so massive that it's something that really truly stands out. And it becomes part of the new version of who we are. It becomes part of the makeup of who we are as a person. And physically, it can change our appearance sometimes to a point where we become self-conscious. Scars can take the most confident person ever and make them the most self-conscious individual ever. Why is that? We're going to talk about that. And we're going to talk about how we face that. But there's not just physical scars. There's mental and emotional scars. And the thing that I have seen about those scars is that just like physical scars, they can take somebody and in essence change their personality and their identity. You say, why do you say, Coach, why do you say just in an essence? Because I know people, and maybe you're someone who's listening to this and you can relate to this. You say, Coach, it has changed me. My scars have changed me. I understand that. My scars have changed me. But what I want to talk about today is perspective. I want to take you on a journey today through scars. I want to take you on a journey today through how we view scars. Life, we talk about here in Grit for Life, Grit Nation, we talk so many times about perspective. Life really is about perspective. It is how we choose to be able to see things. It is how we choose, where we choose to stand. In Grit for Life, I always say so many times, and it's become my life motto, your response is your responsibility. And it comes that way into where we are going to choose to stand in life. Life will put us somewhere, and in that position where we are standing, that's the perspective we have. We only can see a little bit to our right and a little bit to our left. When I was in the military, we would do range cards. Our focus of where our area of operation was, for me particular, was put on a range card. I had a left boundary and I had a right boundary. Everything within that was my area of operation. It's what I was in charge of. The thing about it, though, is we in life will give us a range card. It will put us there and say, okay, to your left and to your right, everything in between that is what you are to focus on. But is that life controlling you? Or is that you controlling life? I dare challenge you to say that it is life controlling you. When we get up and stand up and we look at that range card and say, you know what? I don't like this perspective. I think there's more to this. I think there's more to this than what I'm seeing. And life goes, sit down. And you say, wait a minute, life. I'm in charge here. You're not. So what I want to do is I'm going to change my perspective. I'm going to look a little off, a little different than what you're asking me to look, what you're telling me to look. And when we do, we get to see things a little bit differently. And when we see things differently, we begin to understand the world is a lot bigger than what we thought. And we realize that we are not trapped in the prison that we have put ourselves in. We're not trapped onto that range card. That view does not have to be the only view we have. You say, what does that have to do with scars? It has everything to do with scars. I've shared my story so many times of all the mistakes that I have done in my life, as well as the things that have been done to me. I have grown up just like every single one of us. I have grown up with a life of scars. Yes, both physically and mentally and emotionally. I mean, I have scars on my knees from when I was a kid and I was running, because I did a lot of activity, and I would have scars on my knees where I was running and I fell and a stick went up into my knee. A couple years later, I ended up getting a matching scar on the other knee. I have a scar on my finger I'm currently looking at right now from when I was about 3 years old, and my finger got stuck in a door. Now I was like 3. This was a heavy door. And when the door shut on my finger, I was on the hinge part of it. I couldn't reach the door to open it up. And so there I am, screaming bloody murder, with my finger stuck in the door, blood is pouring out, no one around. And when they finally were able to get me around, they pulled my finger out. It was a mangled mess. They rushed me to the hospital. And the doctors told my parents, you were very fortunate this didn't happen when he was a little older, because his bone in his finger is not fully developed. And so he didn't break it. But I have a scar. That moment when I was 3, I am 45 now. That moment when I was 3 was so devastating to a 3-year-old and so traumatic that every time I look down at my scar, I can remember it. I can remember that incident. Even as I'm speaking now, I can remember what the door looked like. I can remember it was a glass door. I remember looking through the door and seeing people on the other side a little ways away, and they couldn't hear me. That scar is a memory. My sister will tell you, she loves to tell people this, and it's true, I was a bully growing up. And my sister has had, when she hit her adult life, my sister had, I think it was 8 or 9 scars. And yes, her older brother gave every single one of them to her. Now, I can look back, and my sister and I can laugh about those now. Why is that? They're scars. They're a image, they're a reminder of when I wasn't the best brother I could have been. But we joke about those now. But why would we joke about something that was so bad that it left a scar? Again, it's all about perspective. In my emotional and mental scars of my life, for a long time, I allowed those scars to be something that I took a look at and would relive the events that caused the scars in my life. I took those moments out to take away from my present time, to be transported back to a bad time. And I would relive that moment. And I would relive that moment on how it could have been different, all the things I should have done, and I was re-traumatizing my emotion. In essence, what I was doing was I was looking at the scar. It would be as if this scar on my finger, it would be as if every time I looked down at it, I would take a knife and re-cut open that scar to watch it bleed. People who are listening to this, maybe those who are watching on TikTok, would say, why in the world would you do that? Well, in reality, that is what we do when we don't understand what scars are, and we take our mental and emotional scars and continue to go back, relive the moment, and then try to condemn ourselves and put down ourselves by all the things we could have done. It's not us living present. It's us living in the past and trying to take control of something we cannot control. It's like us taking a knife to my scar on my finger and reopening it every single time I thought about it. It doesn't make any sense, does it? but it's what we do. Now, when we think of it that way, it's physically, that obviously doesn't make sense. Physically, we would not do that. Oh, my friend, but there's so much more when it comes to the mental and emotional aspect of this. You see, I talk a lot about in Grit for Life and Grit Nation that it is important to be in control and not let other things control you. And that also includes our mind. Our mind is part of us, but our mind is also something that is wired to protect us. And in what it does so many times to try to protect us is it tries to be in control instead of us trying to control our mind or being in control of our mind. Okay? And so what it will do is it will remind us of that incident that created that emotional or physical scar. For me, it was being molested. One of the things that it is was being molested when I was around 8 years old. For years, I never talked about it because it was easier to avoid it and not to look at it. But then when I would look at it, I would remind myself, now you're thinking, I was molested at 8 years old by a man who was 18 or 19. Okay? I was molested at 8 by a man who was 18 or 19. I want you to think about that. There's absolutely no way that a 8-year-old can defend themselves against an 18 or 19-year-old who's molesting them. I think we all could agree with that, correct? But at 12, at 13, at age 16, at age 18, I wasn't looking back with the mind of an 8-year-old. You see, my mind had grown. My mind had grown, but it was still trying to control me. And so what my mind would do is it would look back at the moment that caused that emotional wound. It's not a scar yet, it's a wound. It created that emotional wound, and it would look back and say, with the mind of an 18-year-old, and say, you could have stopped that. You could have stopped that. So you must have wanted it. You could have stopped it. But you didn't. You could have pushed him off. You could have fought him off. Because I'm thinking with the mind of an 18-year-old, not the mind of an 8-year-old. And so what I was doing in essence is I was cutting back into that wound and putting toxicity into it and putting infection into it that wasn't originally there and had no business being there. Instead of letting it heal, I would constantly look back and pour more dirt and grime into that flesh wound. And I was creating a bigger, festering wound. You said, Coach, I thought we were talking about scars, but you seem to be talking about wounds. You're right on target. You're right where I want you to be. You were right. You're following me exactly where I need you to follow me. Because what I also talked about was changing perspective of how we perceive things. So what it took me doing is learning that my mind was trying to control me in order to protect me. My mind has the best interest at heart for me. It just doesn't always get the things right. And so what it would do is my mind would step back and say, listen, every time that you trusted this guy, you idolized this guy, you wanted to be close to this guy, and he betrayed you. So you can't get close to anybody. You can't get close to anybody because whenever you get close to someone, they will betray you. And so my mind says, this is what I want you to do. I'm never going to let you retrust anyone. I'm never going to let you be close to anybody. And so I learned to live a life with a mask on. I learned to live a life with a mask on that I only allowed people to see the mask. I lived the mask because my mind was telling me this is how I survive. But is that really living? Oh, I thought it was. For over 20 years, I thought it was. I knew in my soul, but see, my mind and my soul had disconnected. My mind had separated from my soul and said, soul, you shush because you get him in trouble because he feels. You shush because whenever you and I connect, soul, he starts feeling. And when he starts feeling, he trusts. When he trusts, he always gets betrayed. Now, is that true? Did I always get betrayed? No, I didn't always get betrayed, but my mind wanted to protect me, so it went to the extreme and says, no, he always gets betrayed. And so guess what? I lived for years behind a mask that I knew wasn't me. I destroyed my first marriage because I was living behind a mask and I wouldn't let anybody get close. And what happens is we begin to have this perspective of who we are. But we know it's false. But we have to now keep up the false persona because everybody around us knows who that is. But then if anybody else starts getting close to that, sometimes people slip through. And when they slip through, our mind goes, danger, 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 Will Robinson, danger. And we begin to attack. Because nobody is to be close to our wound. Nobody is to be close to our wound. And so we attack. I destroyed my marriage because of this. Those who have heard me tell my story, and my wife is in the room that I'm filming this now. She is aware of this story. Those who have heard my story know that my first wife and I, who have a son together, is one heck of a lady. Her and her husband, love them both. But when I was married to her, she was the most broken-hearted person ever because she was married to a man who hadn't learned how to handle a wound and didn't understand scars. And I was angry. Oh, the person that you see on Grit for Life, on Grit Nation, you hear on the podcast is not the man I was then. Until I finally had destroyed so much because I hadn't allowed my wound to become a scar. Why does a wound become a scar? Why is that? A wound becomes a scar when it is cleaned out, the infection is taken away, healing ointment is placed on it, and it is allowed to heal. It wasn't until I realized that my response was my responsibility. Every single time I allowed my anger or I wore a mask and lived, every single person who caused an open wound in my life was winning. Every single time I allowed myself to not be the man that I was destined to be, the man that I was placed on this earth to be. Every time that I wouldn't allow that, I was not allowing my wounds to heal, and I was allowing the person that caused me that wound, even if that person was me, to win. For years, I allowed my abuser to live rent-free in my life and in my head. Think about that. Every time that you allow something, a piece of your life to be taken from you, you are allowing the person who did that, whatever it is, to live rent-free in your head. And they're still winning. You're not the victor yet. You're still the victim. And it is time for us to go from being a victim to a victor. It is time for us to step up and say, my headspace is mine. My headspace is mine. You don't get this anymore. You forced your way into my head. You forced your way into my life because of trauma. You forced your way in. But now I fight back, and I'm going to explain to you why that is so important. It's easy to say. It is so easy. I will stand up. I will fight. I will not let this define me. But then, our mind tries to fight back again. And our mind takes over again. And we start the cycle over again. You go, Coach, I hear you. Coach, I feel you. Coach, I'm sitting in tears right now listening to this because this is so me. You're hitting hard, Coach. I don't know what to do because I have fought and I'm back to where I was. Coach, I have fought and it came back. Every single piece of ground you gain is success. Even if you lose some ground, the fight's not over. The clock is still ticking. My grandfather was a Golden Glove boxer, and I love boxing. I just, for those who didn't watch it or don't know, Mike Tyson just got done fighting, and Roy Jones Sr. And I loved having the opportunity to be able to watch a Mike Tyson fight with my son, who he never had the opportunity to watch Mike Tyson. Okay, so it was cool. But I want you to understand that the fight is never over. If you are on the ground and you are on the ground, but you can still hear my voice as your coach on your corner of the ring, that means this fight's not over, my friend. So let's talk about this. What are we going to do? How are we going to change our perspective? What are we going to do to take this to the next level? How can we change our view and stop hating our scars and loving our scars? You say, Coach, hold on a second. Grab some coffee here. For those who are watching on TikTok, watch me drink some coffee. For those who are listening to the podcast, I'm drinking some pretty good coffee today. So let me say this. You said, Coach, I thought I heard you just say to love my scars. Coach, you don't understand my scars. My scars are ugly. They have deformed me. Coach, I don't look like the person that I used to be. And I want to be that person I used to be. None of us are the people we used to be. Did you hear that? None of us are the people we used to be. And as much as you may want to be the person you used to be, you don't really want to be that person. You said, Coach, what? Wait a minute. No, I love the person I was. When we go back to being the person we used to be, then we have shown no growth. I am going to say that again. I am going to say that again. If we try to be the person that we used to be, then we have not grown. What do you think? That is so powerful when we can understand that. Because see, even through tragedy, we grow. Even through tribulation, we grow. Even through heartache, we grow. And we don't ever need to want to go back to be there. I don't want to go back and be the 8-year-old. I don't want to go back and be my 18-year-old. I don't want to go back and be the 20-year-old. I want to be me here and now, but I want to discover who I am for here and now. True, there are elements of the past me that I need to be. There are elements of me that I want to be. I want to be the empath. I want to be the tender-hearted person. I want to be the individual that cares. But that individual didn't have the scars. And you go, Coach, I know that person didn't have the scars. That's why I want to go back to that person. You ready for this? Get ready. If you have a pen and paper, I want you to write down. If you're on TikTok and you are driving like one of the individuals just said that they're driving, don't do this. But if you're somewhere and you can write this down, I want you to write this down. Here we go. Those who died on the battlefield, those who gave up on the battlefield, never had the opportunity for their wounds to become scars. Scars are a symbol that you won and made it through the battle. They are the symbol that you made it through to the healing. That's what scars are. Scars are a symbol exactly what on TikTok, those who are watching on TikTok, those who are listening to this on the podcast, we're doing a TikTok live. Vita just said scars are the symbol. Hold on, let me say this again. Scars are the symbols that you won and made it through the battle. That is so true. That is so true. So what we can do then is we change our perspective. I started this podcast off saying life says here you can't look right any further right. You can't look any further left. In between the right and left is where your view has to be. And you say, no, life, I'm in control. You're not. I'm going to change my perspective. Life tells us scars are a symbol that we were wounded and that we were at a time, at a low point in our life. Something happened to us and our mind constantly wants to remind us of it in order for us never to go back there again. And so in all of that, we are not in control. Life is in control. Our mind is in control. Our spirit isn't connecting with our mind. And we have created this ultimate chaos of unrealistic perspective of what scars really are. Scars are the symbol that you made it. Scars are the symbol that says, I was there, and yes, it was a fight, and yes, I was wounded, but oh, my friends, let me tell you this. Let me tell you, I didn't die there. I didn't give up there. I kept going. I kept fighting. And when I came out, I was wounded, and the wounds were festering. And they may fester for years. They did in my life. But scars show me that there came a point that I said, today is my day that I start to heal. Today, my response is my responsibility. Today, I'm going to scrape out and clean out those wounds. Today, I am going to clean out and scrape out those wounds. And I'm going to put bandages of good relationships, bandages of good knowledge, bandages of good understanding, bandages of positive focus in changing myself and getting rid of the things that have caused me to wound. I am not going to continue to cut open my wounds so they don't heal. No. Today, I take back control. And healing sometimes takes a while. Healing doesn't happen overnight. We don't have anything like Star Trek that we can put a laser and we can put ourselves on a bed and some scanner thing comes over us and all of a sudden everything just heals. We don't have that. It takes time. But then as it takes time, we have to remember and watch the healing. That fresh new pink skin. We just let that fresh pink skin, brand new baby skin, just sit out there in the sun or not because, no, we have to take care of it. We have to ensure that it is protected from any toxicity that will come our way, that will cause new infection of the new skin. We don't want a staph infection. We don't want it to get gangrene. No. It is fresh, new skin that, yes, it will form into a scar. But my scar, just like the one on my finger, when I take a look at the one on my finger, I now can laugh. I sure wasn't laughing at 3 years old when my tip of my finger almost got snapped off. But now I look at it. It's all weird. Let's see if I can show those on TikTok. Let's see. I don't know. Nope, it's not going to focus. You can kind of see it. Nope. There we go. My finger, even my fingernail's deformed. But I get to look at it now. I get to look at it now and I laugh. I go, whoa, I can remember it. I can remember the incident, but guess what? Oh, you're going to love this. You're going to love this. Because it's healed. Because time has separated me far enough from that incident. Oh, get ready. I can remember the incident. The pain isn't there anymore. The pain is not there anymore. I mean, I have the scar, but the pain is not there. Time has healed. And the scar I can look at now and go, ha, yep, man, that was a crazy time. But it takes time. I can remember so vividly even afterwards. I can remember even as a 3-year-old. I'm 45, and even as a 3-year-old, I can remember being in the hospital. And I can remember them bandaging it up. I can remember them stitching it. I can remember when the big piece of gauze that was looked in the shape of my finger, I remember when it fell off and being scared that my finger was going to fall off. But now, years later, it's just a part of my story. Your scars will be a part of your story. Your scars don't define you. They become a part of your story. But, like, I knew it, Coach. I knew it. Yep. Here comes the but. All right, I'm ready for it. The only way that we can get the scars is to allow the wounds to start healing. Too many of us don't ever let the wounds heal. I mentioned this earlier in a different format. Too many of us continue to keep the wound open because we think that by keeping that wound open, we'll never go back to the heartache. We'll never go back to what caused us to hurt. But instead, we never leave the hospital because the wound's always open and there's always a chance of infection. And so we miss out on the real life outside the hospital. We lose out on the real life we were meant to live beyond the walls of the medical facility that we keep putting ourselves into. You say, but Coach, it's scary out there. Yeah, it is. But it's also fun. It's not fun in a hospital. Coach, there's danger out there. Yep. There is. But there's also life. There's fun things to do. Coach, there's scary people out there. Yep. But there's also cool people. Like me. I'm out here. There's other people out here. And we kind of don't like hospitals, so we'll come and see you when you're wounded, but if you continue to open up the wound and stay there, after a while, I don't want to keep coming to the hospital. I mean, we got roller coasters to ride. We got amusement parks to go to. Well, that's if COVID's not going or taking her out. We got bars to go to, restaurants to experience. We got new food to try out. Nobody likes hospital food. I want to see you outside the hospital. So stop reopening the wound. You say, how do I do that? I'm going to wrap it up with this, because I think this is important to understand. First of all, let's recap. We will get wounded. We will get hurt. That's life. That is life. We have to learn to take our wounds and stop keeping them open, because the more they're open, the more chance they are also and susceptible to infection that can take our lives. It's like a cancer. It just starts eating away if we keep the wounds open. We need them to scab up. We need them to heal. And then, yes, they might even scar. And the scars can sometimes, from one perspective, look ugly. The scars will remind us of what we've been through. And we can focus on that, or choose to focus on that. The scars remind us that we made it through. And if I made it through that, I can make it through the next one. And the next one. And the scars remind us that we're out of the hospital. Those are the things we talked about. But Coach, I understand the wound, and I understand now how to look at the perspective of the scar. But how do I get the wound to become the scar? You start taking your medicine. You start cleaning out. How do you clean out? First of all, you need to take a look at the whole body aspect. Here at Grit for Life, our symbol is 3 gears. If you have seen any of our merchandise, if you have seen our logo, you'll notice there are 3 gears. The 3 gears stand for mind, body, and soul. And the reason we use gears is because gears have to come together at the right time in the right unison, and they have to be constantly working the same, together. The moment one gear gets off track or stops, it stops everything else. So the first thing that we need to do is understand our mind. We need to understand that we need to be in control of our mind and not our mind in control of us. And it's easier said than done. And it's not anything that I would be able to just throw out everything about it right now. Grit for Life on our Facebook page, we do about 4 times a year, we do these 4-week-long workshops that are free. And yes, Vita, grit and grace. We do these 4-week-long workshops that are free, and we teach you mind, body, and soul. But the short answer would be is you need to take a look and say, okay, am I in control of my mind, or is my mind controlling me? I've heard you say today, Coach, that my mind will try to protect me. It has the best intentions, but it will keep me from living if I am not in control. So you need to ask yourself today, am I living in fear? If I'm living in fear, then that is your mind controlling you and not you controlling your mind. What I do is I give some simple steps. I usually tell people this when they first come to me and they want a real quick answer. There's a lot more in depth to this. But the quick answer is this. I try my best to start as soon as how many of you, when you get up in the morning, grab some cup of coffee here again. Hold on one second, everybody. How many of you, when you first get up in the morning, one of the first things you do is your mind starts going back to the things of yesterday? Can't control yesterday, right? Yesterday's gone. So why are we thinking about that? Or maybe it's about an argument you had. Or maybe you jump on social media and you're reminded of all the crap that's going on in the world. You're inundated with COVID stuff, and you're just going, oh my God, or you're looking at the news. Or maybe you're not doing anything. You're just on autopilot. If you're on autopilot, your mind is in control, and you're not in control of your mind. You're not living purposefully. So how do we start with a mind, body, and soul to start the healing for that wound to become a scar? So, the first thing I do when I get up is I try my best to either put a positive. I have several different playlists. Usually I will create a playlist. So our workshops I was talking about that are 4 weeks long, we always have a theme. The last one we did was called Legendary. And so I have an actual music playlist called the Legendary Playlist. And it has all kinds of positive messaged songs on it. So I'll either start up my day with listening to that playlist. Absolutely. There are individuals those who are listening to this on podcasts. Some of those who are watching it on TikTok Live are asking me to share my playlist, and I absolutely will. But I will start my playlist off in the morning, or I will go and listen to a podcast, or I will go to YouTube and just simply type in motivational video. Now, you say, I don't have time to listen to a video first thing in the morning, Coach. That's how you do it. Multitask. Our subconscious will pick things up. what I will usually do is I will start the video, I will play it on full level volume, okay? And then I'll start doing I'll get my cup of coffee, I'll go take a shower, but I'm listening to it and I'm catching bits and pieces. What it's doing is it's setting my mind up for the day. It's setting my mind up to get ready for that day. Will hard things come that day? Absolutely. Will tough things come that day? Absolutely. Will obstacles come in my way? Absolutely. Will there be things, if I am wounded, will there be things that will try to keep that wound open? Yes. But I'm putting my bandage on first thing in the morning. I'm cleaning out my wound first thing in the morning. I am starting my day off positive. Anything negative starts coming, I'm like, nope, I am now in control of my mind. No, I don't have time for that. Then comes the thing that if you've been part of Grit for Life, you've heard me say this before, beating yesterday's you with today's you. So mind, that's the mind, the body. The body, I go, okay, today I may not have time to go work out, but what did I do yesterday that I can do something better today? I have a step counter. I know everyone, there's so many people out there. I don't wear an iWatch or anything like that, but I have a step counter on my phone that counts my steps. So I'm like, okay, how many steps did I take yesterday? So I take a look at it, I'm like, okay, yesterday I took 21,000 steps. Bam. Today, I'm going to take 21,010 steps today. Trying to build my body to beat yesterday's you with today's you. But what is doing that? My mind. So now my mind, because I started off positive, and now I'm sitting there and I am determined to beat yesterday's you with today's you, now my mind is coming in contact with my body. The gears are lining up. Right? The last gear is the soul. And this is how we start getting the wound to go from a wound to a scar. The scar is the symbol of the thing that shows us we made it through. So the soul portion is this. I dwell. Do not dwell on the negative, but I dwell on things, okay, what can I change in my life that I have control over? You're right, because your response is your responsibility. What do I have control over? Okay. What are some things that I need to change in my life? Because we all can better ourselves, right? Yeah, we can. So, okay. I can better myself today by doing A, B, or C. Only you can answer that. But you don't hear me saying, well, I can better myself because I used to not. I'm keeping the negative out of it. I can better myself right now because of this. Then, what I'm going to do is say, what can I do today that can teach my mind something new? I am constantly reading. I am constantly learning. What can I learn today? How can I better myself today? Absolutely. Vita says on TikTok, being present. You see, you didn't hear me say, I can look back and review all the things that I did or didn't do or all the things that hurt me. Nope, I didn't say that. You didn't hear me say, well, tomorrow I can and the next day I can, because goals are important. But in order to, and we do need to set goals, that's a whole different subject. But right now we're talking about putting salve on those wounds. When we begin to do this, our mind, our body, our soul begin to combine together. The gears are now working in unison. Chaos is limited. Chaos will always be there, but it now becomes limited. And now who's in control? I am. I am now in control. Will the pain still be there? Yes, but the healing can now start. When the healing starts, I now can start putting in the salve and the ointment and the bandages. And when that begins to start, the scar forms. When the scar forms, I get to step out of the hospital and live life instead of being in captivity. When the scar forms, I get to sit there and say, ladies and gentlemen, this is the moment you're waiting for. I am back. I'm back. I'm living. I'm beating yesterday's you with today's you. My response is my responsibility. I went from just surviving to thriving. I went from victim to victor. Thank you for listening to this podcast today. For those on TikTok, I'm going to wrap up the podcast. I'm going to stay live here for a second, so stay with me. Let me wrap up this podcast, and then I'll come back real quick. For those who are listening to the podcast, please check us out on Facebook, Grit for Life. Grit stands for Getting Ready in Training. So our full name is Getting Ready in Training for Life. We can be found on TikTok at Grit Nation, hashtag Grit Nation, or at Grit Nation. You can find us also on YouTube, where our podcasts get put, as also on iHeartRadio and Spotify and Apple Podcasts. I thank you for spending time, and do me a favor, go out and look up Mick Blankenship. He's the one that you heard at the beginning of this podcast. He has allowed us to use his music for our podcast. A really good, genuine person and a great rock artist. His new album should be releasing soon. His current album is definitely worth listening to. It was actually produced by the bass guitarist of the rock group Disturbed. So go check him out, and check us out at Grit Nation and Grit for Life on Facebook. And thank you. And as always, your response is your responsibility. Now what I want you to do is go grit it.
A bottle of whiskey